visualization with Gephi software. Actually, this software is useful for visualization of graphs and networks, and how we could extract some information from the data. So first, I think you need to just go to our workshop website, which is shown here as sites.google.com, g.clemson.edu with lab information visualization with Gephi. So just go to this website and you could find the outline of this workshop. At the beginning, we will just introduce some basic information about the network and graphs and how we could visualize them based on nodes, edges, attributes, etc. Then we will move on to the introduction to Gephi software and what we could use in terms of creating visualization out of the graphs and which tools are available in the Gephi software. In the next section, we will go to creating high quality rendering from the visualized graph and networks. And at the end, we will explore some advanced Gephi filters, such as exploring the clusters, directed networks, and how we could extract some statistical information from the graphs. So first, you need to download the Gephi software, which could be downloaded for your operating system by just clicking in our website and going here. So you need to just download the Gephi software for your operating system, and after that you could just follow the rest of the workshop. So we'll move on to the first section, which is about the introduction to network and graph visualization. If you click on the first section, so the graph in its simplest definition, it just includes nodes and edges. You could think of the nodes as some points in 2D space that are shown by some coordinates like the XY coordinates, and those are just the points. And the edges just show the connectivity between these nodes or vertices, which could, for example, visualize some relation or connection between these nodes in your graph or network. So in the simplest case that is shown here, the nodes are just the first name of some people, and we just mark them by their ID, which is the first column for the nodes shown here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the IDs of the nodes. And then we have some labels for the nodes, which are just some name of the people. And we have an attribute which just, in this example, just shows the gender of the people that we just use their first name. And besides these nodes, we have some edges, which, for example, shows the friendship between these people, that we just visualize that by creating a line between the two nodes that have the common friendship together. So for the edges, we need to have a source and target that just started from a node, which is just a source node, and it just ends at the target node, which is shown here. So that's the connectivity matrix of these nodes. So that's just the basic concept of the graph or the network that we will use in the Gephi software to visualize the graph and networks. We could have some other attributes. For example, one of the most generic or intrinsic properties of the graph or network is the degree. So the degree of the graph is the number of the connections that each node have in your graph. So for example, if one of the nodes is connected to 4 surrounding nodes, the degree at that point is just 3. So we could visualize the connection of each node, for example, based on this color that is shown here. So the degree is one of the most useful information that we could extract from the network. So the Gephi software has some tools to extract the degree and explore the clusters and see which regions have higher degrees, which means those regions have higher connection. So that means those regions are more concentrated in terms of the higher density of the node connection. So that was one of the most general concept of the network and graphs that we will use in this workshop. Finally, as I said, you need to go to the Gephi.org website to download the Gephi software. After downloading the Gephi software, you need to install 2 plugins, and you could just open the Gephi software, which is shown here, and then go to the tools and click on the plugins, and then go to the available plugins shown here, and then just download the geo layout plugin and the multimode networks transformation. So those are just 2 plugins that we need to download before starting the workshop. So after you downloaded the Gephi software, just follow the tools plugins and download the geo layout multimode networks transformation plugins. After that, you need to download some data sets. We will work on with 3 different data sets in this workshop. The first one is just the data set of the COVID-19 across the United States in the county level for the day of April 20, which is extracted from the New York Times database for that day. And then another one is the data set of the COVID-19 for the state of South Carolina, again at the county level for the April 20 day, which is again extracted from the New York Times database. So you need to just download these 2 data sets for the first section of the workshop. And at the end, for the advanced section, we need to download some other data sets that have both nodes and the edge, because for the first 2 data set we don't have any connection between the nodes, so there is no connectivity. But for the advanced section we need to download 2 other data sets that have node and edges, which is the connectivity matrix between the nodes. So those are the 4 data sets that we need to download before starting the workshop. So just make sure that you go into our website that I sent to you, the links, and just download all of these links here, 4 files to just start the workshop. So the next section, which is just the introduction to the Gephi software. So let me just open the Gephi software. So that's the main menu of the Gephi software. After you just opened it, you could just select on a new project here. And this window here, the white window in the middle, is the window that you see the rendering of the graph or networks in that. So that's the rendering window that we have. The other section that we have here, or the configuration here we have, is called the appearance. So you could just modify or configure the appearance of the nodes and edges and their labels, for example, changing their colors, their size in a meaningful way, and extract some information from your graph. The next one, which is one of the most useful tools in the Gephi software, is called the layout configuration. So you could arrange or rearrange your graph based on some information or based on some data that you have or attribute that you have in your graph. For example, for the first 2 data sets that we use the geographical data of the longitude and latitude of the counties in the United States to just rearrange the nodes to just represent the United States map or the South Carolina state map. So those are this one, the layout configuration, is useful for rearranging the graph or networks. So that's the introduction that I said here. You see the appearance, layout, rendering windows, and some filters built in filters which are available here that we will work on during the workshop. So the next section is how to load data sets into the Gephi software. For the first two parts of this workshop, we will just use some data sets that just only includes nodes, and there is no edges or the connectivity between the nodes. So in order to load the data set, you need to just click on the data laboratory here, and then go to the import a spreadsheet, and then just find the first data set that you downloaded. Is called the data-sc, which is the COVID-19 data set in a county level in the state of the South Carolina for the day April 20. So click on your file data-sc shown here and click on open. Here in the preview section, you could see some heads up from your data set to see what's in your data in terms of the different attributes or different information. The first one, CSV file to import, is just shows the path of your data set wherever you just download it. For example, you download in the downloads folder, you should just put that path here. So that's the path of the file that we will use to load it into the Gephi software. And the other one, the separator, means because this data set is a comma separated in a comma separated format, so we need to tell the Gephi that the separator between each column is just a comma. And import as, we tells the Gephi to import this data as nodes, edges, or other information that we could load. So first we will choose the nodes. As I said, in this data set we don't have any edges. So we choose the nodes and we click on next. So make sure you choose the comma separated for the separator, comma separator, and import as nodes tables. So that's the one. And then you click on next. So you need here to tell Gephi each of these columns what's the data type or data format of each of these columns. For example, the county name and the estate name are just a string variables, which means just they're comprised from characters that shows the county name and estate name. But for example, the latitude and the longitude of each county is just a double value. So you need to change that string to the double here for both longitude and latitude. And the number of the cases of the COVID-19 is just the integer number, because that's just the number of infected people. So that's the integer number. You need to choose the integer for the cases, and also for the deaths, for the number of the deaths that we had from the COVID-19. So that's also an integer variable. So we need to choose the integer for that as well. So we showed the data format for each column. The county and estate are just the string variables. The latitude and longitude are just the double variables, and the cases and deaths are just integer numbers. So after that, we are finished with loading the data set. So we need to just click on finish to just load the data set. And here we see some information about the graph that we have. It says the graph has 46 nodes, which each of these nodes shows the 46 counties in the South Carolina. So that's the reason we have 46 nodes. And as I said, there is no edges or connection between these nodes. So the number of the edges is just equal to 0. So we click on OK. So the data set is just loaded here, but we see just the table. So in order to see the actual graph, we need to go back to the overview section. So we click on overview, and that's the graph here. So there is no color, there is no information in this graph, and it's hard to see each of these points represent what. So the first task for creating the visualization Gephi is to create a meaningful rearrangement out of the graph or the nodes that we have in the network. So because we know that each of these nodes represent the counties in the state of the South Carolina, and we could rearrange them meaningfully based on their longitude and latitude that we have in our data set. So we go to the layout and we choose the geo layout that we downloaded as a plugin before starting the workshop. So make sure you just downloaded the geo layout by going to the tools, plugins, available plugins. So you need to just download the geo layout from here. And after that, you go to the layout section and you choose the geo layout. You see a lot of more layouts, but because for this specific data set that we know that each node represent the counties in the state of South Carolina, so that's a more meaningful layout that we could choose. So we click on geo layout. The first variable that we have in our layout is called the scale. So the scale just defines the distance between the nodes that we have in the graph that we want to rearrange them. The smaller values have more packing and the distance between the node is very small, but if we choose a really higher values, the distance would be higher. So that just you need to find the best value based on the experience and the appearance of your graph to see which value is good for your network or graph, because there is no single value that you could use for all the cases. So that's the value you need to change each time based on your data set. So for this data set, I choose 10,000 and I just tell the geo layout configuration that the latitude attribute that I had in my data set is the latitude, and the longitude is the one that I had in my data set as well. And make sure the projection is set to the Mercator. So after that, you need to click on Run, and you see that it just arranged our nodes in a familiar fashion of the state of South Carolina. So now we see that, okay, each node represents each counties in the state of South Carolina, because these nodes are arranged in a more meaningful way in comparison to the first one that we had no idea what these nodes represent. So the next section that we have in our data in our Gephi software is that you could put some other attributes in terms of the color or changing the size of the nodes, and also put some labels in your graph to have a better visualization. Because right now we know that, okay, these nodes represent the counties, but what about the number of the cases or the number of the deaths that we had for the COVID-19 data set? So I choose to show the number of the cases by the color and the number of the deaths by size of the nodes. So, but it's up to you. You could just change that for your homework. So first, I just, in the appearance section, I click on node, and then I click on color palette here, and then I click on ranking to just choose which attributes that I want to use for coloring the nodes. By going to the ranking, I choose the cases, because I said I want to color this graph based on the number of the cases in each county. So I choose the cases, and here I could choose a color bar. So That's completely up to you. There are some default color bars that you could use for your visualization, but for example, I choose the last one here. And then I just apply. And you see that here the red colors represent the lower number of the cases and the blue numbers show the higher number of the cases. But we could just make that invert to just show the red ones shows the higher number of the cases and the blue one shows this smaller number of the cases. So you could just come here and click on invert and then put the colors of the cases on each node. So that was just for configuring the color of the nodes. The other one that we could use for make it more meaningful, because right now you see that a lot of nodes here have same color as blue, but a few of them just are more reddish, or just one of them is just red. So that means the distribution of the k number of the cases across the counties are just not linear. So we could click on this spline editor here. Just click on the spline editor and configure the rank interpolation. So you need to click on that. As I said, the first or the default configuration is that the distribution of the data is linear, but that might not be the case here. So we could make it, for example, exponential or something like that, which might be more appropriate, because some counties have a really few number of the cases, but if 2 or 3 of them has a really higher number of the cases. So we could choose this one, for example, or whatever you want here. And then again, click apply. So you see the colors now are distributed more meaningfully in comparison to the previous one that we had. So you have more reddish and more intermediate colors for the nodes. So it means the number of the cases are not distributed linearly across the different counties. So for example, these 3 counties, which might be I think the Columbia, Greenville, and somewhere near the Charleston, has a really higher number in comparison to the rest of the counties in the state of the South Carolina. So the other one that we wanted to, because we had the data or the information about the number of the deaths as well in our graph. So the other one is just we could represent or visualize that data set based on the size of the nodes in our graph. So again, we go to the appearance and click on nodes, and instead of the color, we click on size here. So just click on size and go to the ranking again and choose the depths, which means we want to just change the number of change the size of the nodes based on the number of deaths in each county. And we could define the mean max size that we want to use for that. For example, I would choose 10 to 100 for beginning, but you see that's too much, because it's hard to see because there are some overlaps. So I would change it to 10 to 3, and that would be more meaningful. So you could just change the mean as 10 and the max size at 30. So that's more meaningful. And those are, again, the number of the deaths. So the size of the nodes here shows the number of the deaths. And again, if you see that there are some counties that have same size, so it means again the number of the deaths also is not distributed linearly across the counties. So again, you could just choose other distributions, or for example this exponential distribution to visualize it more meaningfully. And again, click on that. So I would just change this one to 20, so that would be better. And that shows the color represents the number of the cases in each county, and the size of the nodes represent the number of the deaths that we had in the state of the South Carolina. But we have again even more information because we know we have the name of each counties for each of these nodes. So we want to see the name, or possibly put, for example, the number of the cases in our graph for the visualization. So in order to use some of the attributes for the labelings, you need to come here in the rendering window and click on attributes. Just click on this. By default, it's just searching for a column named the label, but not necessarily we have a column named label. But we want to use the name of the county. So you just uncheck the label and check the county, which means you want to use the labels based on the name of the counties for each node. So you choose the county, and also, for example, you want to, besides putting the name of the counties, also the number of the cases. So you choose also the cases. So we uncheck the label, and we check the county to represent the name of the counties here. And also we check the cases to represent the number of the cases as well. So we click on OK. And then in order to visualize the labels, you just need to come to the rendering window here and again click on the show node labels. That would just show the chosen labels here. Okay, so those are the labels that shows the name of the county. The first one, for example, this one is the Oconee County, and the 17 is just the number of the cases in that county. But you see that the size of the labels are not appropriate here because there's really overlap between the labels and it's hard to see what's going on here. So again, we want to just make the size of the labels meaningful. So we'll come back to the appearance and we click on nodes and we click on the label size. You could define a constant, or by clicking on the unique, you could define a constant label size. For example, let me just decrease the size to the 0.25 and then click on apply. You see that it's too small. But it's more, now if you choose, for example, the 0.5, it's better to see the name of the counties as well as the number of the cases in each county here. So that's more appropriate. But also you could choose, for example, by clicking on the label size and going onto the ranking and choose the number of the cases for choosing the size. So for example, here we choose the mean and max size for the labels between the 0.1 and 0.3. And as we know that the number of the cases are distributed exponentially, again, we click on the spline to configure the rank interpolation for changing the size of the labels, and we click on this exponential distribution. So we click apply and you see that Now the labels are so defined more meaningfully because the ones with the high number of the cases have bigger label in comparison to the one with the smaller number of the labels. But let me just make it bigger, a little bit bigger. Yeah, so that's more appropriate. So you could just click or just put your cursor in each one of them. It just show you the data in that county. So that's the one that we had for for the first section of the workshop, to just show how we could just use this data set and, for example, change the size of the nodes, change the color of the nodes, and also change the label of the nodes to show the visualization and information about the number of the cases that we have and the number of the deaths that we have in our data set. If you want to just center your graph in your window, just click here on the center on graph. I would just center the graph for you, but you could just always zoom it. So let me just bring it again. Yeah, so that one is better. And now sometimes you want to just change the background color to just save your final visualization that we have here for the number of the cases and the number of the deaths because of the COVID-19 virus uh, in the state of the South Carolina. So in order to change the background color, you could just click here in the uh, rendering window and choose whatever you want as the background color. So here I want to just choose a black background. So that would just change the background to black, but you could choose whatever you want here. So that's just up to you based on the visualization that you want to create from your data set. So that was the first section of this workshop, that we just introduced basic information about the Gephi software, how we could load the data into the software, and how we could change the color, the size of the graphs, and also put some labels and create visualization or changing the colors in a more meaningful way and extract some information about the graph and networks that we had. So that was the first section of the workshop for the introduction to the Gephi software.